Good evening, friends. Very good to see you all. Thank you for joining us again for another episode of BNN tonight with Bhante Suddaso, who will be talking about right speech. Very, very needed topic and reminder, something that we can practice every single moment of our life. Anyway, before we move to that, we can chant the Ratana Sutta as usual. So let me put the link actually on the live chat. And AP, Marielle, Kevin, Lilia, and Liz. And of course, welcome to Bhante Suddaso, who is kindly teaching us tonight again and leading us in the chanting. All right.
Okay, so we'll chant the Ratana Sutta. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Yani bhutani samagatani bhummani vayani vahantaleke. Sabeva bhuta sumana bhavantu atopi saka chasunantu bhasitam. Tasmahi bhutani sameta sabe metam karota manusiya pajaya. Devacharato chaharanti eva ling tasmahi nera kata pamata. Yankinchi vitang itavahurang vasage suvayang ratanang panitang. Nano samangati tathagatena idampi buddhe ratanang panitang. Etena sachena subhati hotu. Kayang viragam amatang panitang yadajjaga sakyamuni samahito. Natena dhammena samati kinchi edampi dhamme ratanang panitang. Etena sachena subhati hotu. Yang buddha seto parivannai suching samadhimanantarikanyamahu. Samadhina tena samona vijjati dampi dhamme ratanang panitang. Etena sachena suvati hotu. Ye punggala atasatam pasata chatari etani yugani honti. Te dakineya sugata sasavaka ete sudinnani mahapalani. Idampi sanghe ratanang panitang etena sachena suvati hotu. Yesu payuta manasa dalhena nikamino gotamasa sanamhi. Te patipata matang vigaiha ladha mutanim puting punchamana. Idampi sanghe ratanang panitang etena sachena suvati hotu. Yathinda kilo pataving sito siya chatu pivate via sampakampiyo. Tatu pamang samburisang badami yo arya sachani aveksha pasati. Idampi sanghe ratanam panitang etena sachena suvati hotu. Ye arya sachani vibhavayanti gambhira panyena sudesitani. Kinchapi te honti pusapamata na te bhavanga dhamanga diyanti.
Idampi
Sanghe ratanang panitam etena sachena subhati hotu. Sahava sadasana sampadaya daya sudhamma jahita bhavanti. Sakaya diti vichike chitancha silam vatam vapi yadati kinchi. Chatuhapaye chabe pamuto chachapitana niyababbo katum. Idampi sanghe ratanang panitam etena sachena subhati hotu. Kinchapi sokamang karoti papakam kayena vacha udacheta sava. Avambo sota sapati chadaya avambata ditapada savuta. Idampi sanghe ratanang panitang etena sachena subhati hotu. Vanapagumbe yatha bhusitage gemanamase patamasmin gemhe. Tadupamam dhammavaram adesai nibbanagaming paramam hitaya. Idampi buddhe ratanang panitam etena sachena subhati hotu. Varo varanyu varado varaharo anuttaro dhammavaram adesai. Idampi buddhe ratanang panitam etena sachena subhati hotu. Kinam puranam navam nati sambhavam virata ceta yatike bhavasmin. Te kina bija virodhi chanda nibbanti dhira yatayam paripo. Idampi sanghe ratanam panitam etena sachena subhati hotu. Yani bhutani samagatani bhummani vayani vahantaleke. Tathagatam deva manusapujitam buddham namasama subhati hotu. Yani bhutani samagatani bhummani vayani vahantaleke. Tathagatam deva manusapujitam dhammam namasama subhati hotu. Yani bhutani samagatani bhummani vayani vahantaleke. Tathagatam deva manusapujitam sangham namasama subhati hotu. Etena sacha vanjena dukkhavupasamantu te. Etena sacha vanjena vayavupasamantu te. Etena sacha vanjena rogavupasamantu te. Okay, lovely. So please go ahead and get in meditation posture. And we'll do a few minutes of meditation practice together. There's one person I knew who, she said when she first went to live at a Zen monastery, she was surprised how long it took for the people there to get settled into meditation posture. But eventually she realized why that was. So it's good to really take the time, take a solid 2 or even 3 minutes to really just work on making sure your posture is very stable, very upright, very relaxed, and also that there's no pressure anywhere where it might cause a lot of pain or might cause your any part of your body to fall asleep. So really taking the time at the start of the meditation to really pay full attention to how the body is positioned and to position it in the best way to support your meditation. But once you've done that, make a resolution to let the body be still. Stillness of body directly supports stillness of mind. Stillness of body supports samadhi. Stillness of body supports clarity of mind. And uprightness of body supports alertness of mind. So letting the body be completely still without slumping or slouching then creates the conditions for a steady, alert mind. So settling into position, resolving to let the body be still. And take a few long, slow, deep breaths. With each breath, letting the body and mind relax. As if each breath was sweeping all the tension out of the body, sweeping all the noise out of the mind. And when you're ready, you let the breath return to its natural rhythm, uncontrolled. And bring attention within the body. You might choose a particular part of the body to focus on, such as your hands, your abdomen, your torso, your nose. Or you might just feel the whole body all at once as a single object, a single domain of attention. You might choose a very small area, as tiny as a pinpoint. Or you might choose a very large area. It doesn't matter. What matters is that we give a clear boundary, a clear center for the mind. And we hold the mind steady within that boundary. We hold the mind steady, immobile, and alert within the body. With each passing moment, trying to feel the body ever more intensely and clearly. while maintaining a sense of relaxation and ease, a sense of serenity and joy. Keep placing the mind in the body, treating awareness of the body as the most important thing, the most critical thing imaginable, is to be clearly, intensely aware of the body, inside and out, every moment. This is the most urgent task. Everything else can wait for later. unifying the mind in this one task of feeling the body clearly and intensely in every moment. Relax your posture.
All right, thank you, Bante, for guiding us in meditation. And welcome to Melinda, Adriana, Priyakant, Gita, Gabriella, Rich, Bradley, Mark, and Jens. Welcome to all of you, friends. So as mentioned, Bante will be sharing words of Dhamma on right speech this evening. What a lovely thing. All right, thank you, Bante.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. So we've been going through the Noble Eightfold Path, one step at a time. And so far we've had some quite lovely explanations of the first two steps. So Ayasoma speaking about Sammaditthi, right view, and Bhante Jayasara talking about Samma Sankappa, right attitude. And today I'll be speaking about Samma Vacha, so right speech. And this is a really important one. So one pattern that I've noticed over the years, both in my own practice and in the countless other practitioners that I've spent time with, so both other monastics and also lay people who come to practice in monasteries, is that right speech is one of the most difficult aspects of the path. That we form our good intentions, we form our good thoughts, we get that part, we get the whole meditation stuff, more or less. We kind of get the whole right view thing to a certain point. We're doing pretty well at the whole not killing people and stealing their things part. We're doing pretty good on that. Though we'll talk about that tomorrow. There's actually a lot more to it than just not killing people and taking their stuff. But that's a great start. Once again, great start. Don't kill people and take their stuff. If you can do that, you're off to a great start. But again, that's for the next day. That's not for today. But then we find, so even though we're doing pretty good on these other parts of the path, it's a very, very common experience to have a really hard time with speech. All too often, we quickly and easily slip into unwholesome speech, harmful speech. And there's a number of reasons for this. I think one reason for this is because it's so easy. At the drop of a hat, we can utter words. And it takes time and effort to go to Walmart and buy a gun and plan to kill your neighbor and then set an ambush and all that. That all takes a lot of time and effort. That whole killing thing, it normally takes a fair amount of involvement. But saying harsh speech, you can just bam, say harsh speech. It only takes about 1/10 of a second, if that. So it's something that we slip into very quickly and easily. I've also noticed that very often we tend to have this kind of idea that speech doesn't really matter that much. We tend to have this idea of words are cheap. We have this idea oh, you can just say things, it doesn't really matter, it's just words. How many times have we heard the phrase, it's just words? And often we use that to justify our own statements. It's oh, it's just words. I'll just say what I feel. But what we're actually doing is we're covering up the fact that we're not considering what we're saying. We're not really paying close attention to what we're saying, why we're saying it, how we're saying it, and what effect it's having on the people involved. So one thing very interesting on the subject of speech that's been pointed out in Vinaya classes. So Vinaya is the monastic rules, the code of conduct that monastics follow. About 80% of the monastic rules can be broken by speech. So this includes things like the rule about not killing people. We can break it by speech. If I tell somebody, I don't really like Bhante Jayasara anymore, it would be really great if somebody killed him. And then that person goes and kills Bhante Jay. I have incurred a very serious breach of monastic rules. In fact, if I even say that, even if the person doesn't follow through, I've still incurred a significant offense. In fact, even if I'm just sitting by myself and nobody's around and I say out loud, I hope Bhante Jay dies, that is also a breach of the monastic rules. It's relatively subtle. I mean, this is the things I've said are in decreasing order of severity. But this shows, like, even a rule like killing people can be broken just by speech, just by saying something with the intention of causing another person's death. That can actually break a rule and lead to us ceasing to be a monastic. It's really serious. And the same with, again, about 80% of the monastic rules. If we just say the wrong thing at the wrong time, then we wind up in breach of the rules. So it's very important. And of course, it's not just for monastic rules, it actually applies for all of us. So it's important to keep that in mind, to constantly look at what we're saying and what consequences are coming about because of what we say. Looking at our attitudes and motivations. Why are we saying what we're saying? And really looking thoroughly, because oftentimes we have multiple layers of motives. Our surface motive might be like, oh, I am saying this for the benefit of the people involved. But we look a little bit deeper and we're like, and I'm also saying it because I really hate that person and I want to dig at them a little bit. And we look deeper and we're like, and I have a subtle hatred of all people who look like that, or all people of that race, or all people of that gender. Or we look a bit deeper when we realize, actually, I hate myself quite a bit, and I like stirring up trouble because it's uncomfortable. Or we look a little bit deeper and we realize that we actually have no freaking clue why we're saying what we're saying. We might look at our own mind and we realize that we're just running on habits and patterns which might have made sense a long time ago, but have long since lost their relevance. So it's important to really look very deeply at our motives and attitudes and intentions when we speak. One person comes to mind, and I can't mention their name for the sake of confidentiality, but one person comes to mind who on the surface has like very good motives of social justice and equality and betterment, and then gets lost in this like crusader paladin mode of like, I will fix the world with my righteous crusade. And this person then goes around engaging in incredible amounts of harmful, destructive, abusive, divisive, and harsh speech. Theoretically, from this motive of trying to fix the injustice of the world. So in theory, that's a good motive, but then that good motive gets used as an excuse for engaging in tremendous amounts of wrong speech, tremendous amounts of destructive and harmful and unwholesome speech. So we need to be really careful to look beneath the surface. One of the things which comes to mind for me is, this was very harmful for me as a teenager. One of my sisters used to say incredibly insulting and demeaning things to me. Like just out of the blue, she would say things like, you're so ugly that no one will ever want to be with you. Just out of the blue, she would say these things to me. And I would be like, where is this coming from? And this had a very harmful effect on my self-esteem for years and years and years. And at one point she told me that she saw it as her personal, like it was her personal responsibility to make sure I didn't get too arrogant. And that was why she was always saying these incredibly insulting things to her. So in her mind, she was like, I am doing my brother a service by making sure his arrogance doesn't get out of control. But the actual effect was that it was just destroying my self-esteem. The actual effect was that it was actually building up neuroses within my mind. It wasn't helping me at all. It was just damaging me. So she claims that her motives were good. I'm actually not convinced. Maybe her surface level motives were good, but what was going on beneath that? What else was happening there? It's not for me to know. It's only for me to surmise. It's for her to try to figure out if she ever decides to look. But that's an example of how one can have, on the surface level, good intentions, but then use that as a justification for doing very harmful things to others, with speech, with what we say, with how we act. So I particularly wanted to bring attention to the 4 standard descriptions the Buddha gives of right speech. And the usual short form of this is simply refraining from false speech, divisive speech, harsh speech, and useless speech. But in a number of suttas, the Buddha gives a more detailed description with a particular emphasis on right speech in terms of what we should be doing. Not just what we shouldn't be doing, but what we should be doing, how we should be using speech. So I'm going to go ahead and go through this and talk about what the Buddha says about how to practice right speech, wholesome speech, beneficial speech. So the first one, abandoning false speech, one refrains from false speech. One is a speaker of truth, committed to the truth, trustworthy, reliable, not spreading poisonous statements in the world. So this is the first one. So refraining from false speech, so refraining from any kind of deliberate lies, refraining from making false statements. And of course, the worst kind of this is when you know for sure that a statement is false and you say it anyway. Another thing is when you are not quite sure whether or not something is completely true, but you present it as though it was complete truth. You're not quite sure that something is 100% accurate, but you present it as though it was a definite fact. This is a more subtle form of lying, a more subtle form of false speech. So if we're only 90% sure about something, then we should say, I'm only 90% sure, I'm not completely sure. Or if we're not aware of something being complete truth, then we should also be clear about that. It's like, I don't think this is complete. This is just part of the story, part of the information, but I'm presenting it anyway because I think it's important or beneficial or whatever. So also being careful about partial truths, being clear to be straightforward when we're presenting a partial truth or a limited truth or an incomplete truth. There's a lovely sutta, the Chanki Sutta, about a Brahmin named Chanki, which people always laugh when I mention his name. So this is purely a coincidence that it sounds like the English word chunky. That actually is how the Pali word is pronounced. C-A-N-K-I is pronounced chunky. It does not mean the person was chunky. It just happens to be how the name is pronounced. Anyway, in that, the Buddha talks about protecting truth. And the Buddha says the way we protect truth is not by saying, this is definitely true. Rather, what we do is we say, this is how I see it. This is my belief. This is my perspective. This is my experience. Not to say this is absolutely for sure the way things are, because we might not know, but rather saying, this is how I see it. This is my experience. This is my perspective. That's a true statement. Especially if we're willing to acknowledge that our perspective might be distorted or flawed or incomplete. We're willing to acknowledge that our viewpoint is just one viewpoint. So that's speaking truth. And another element of this is again, maybe we're not deliberately speaking false statements, but we are saying something which we haven't properly confirmed or looked into ourselves. So this also is something which it's not quite speaking truth, is it? So we should also make an effort to look into what we're saying, to see whether or not what we're saying is actually accurate before we start spreading it around. So the Buddha says, one is a speaker of truth, committed to the truth. So we're committed to truth. So not this kind of half-hearted, well, I'll use the truth when it benefits me and not use it when it doesn't benefit me, but we're committed to the truth. And this is a very important element of Buddhist practice because ultimately we're trying to figure out the highest truth, the deepest truth, which is the truth of reality as it is, the truth of awakening, the truth of enlightenment. So we really need to be sincerely committed to the truth, because also the harmful karmic effects of spreading untruths is that we will be exposed to untruth. We will be deceived. We will be lied to. We will be misled in the future. And since our number one goal in Buddhist practice is to come to the ultimate realization of truth, we don't want to do anything which will sabotage that mission. So creating the karma of untruth might seem harmless, but ultimately it's undermining the path to enlightenment. So it's not to be done lightly, not to be done at all if we can. And the Buddha says one is to be trustworthy. The more we speak truth, and the more clearly committed we are to speaking truth, and the more clearly committed we are to not lying, then the more likely people are to trust what we say. And this is something I've really come to appreciate as a monastic. As a monastic, I can genuinely, honestly say, I do not tell lies. I do not lie. If you ask me something and I reply, then you can trust that I am not lying to you. And that is an amazing thing to be able to say. To be able to say that you can be absolutely certain that I will not lie to you. I may not tell you what you want to hear, but I will not tell you lies. This is a commitment that I have made as a monastic. I have committed to not telling lies. So that means that you can see me as trustworthy, as reliable, as the Buddha says, trustworthy, reliable. You can trust that the statements I make are things that I genuinely believe to be true. And if you can point out falsity in anything I say, then I will honor that, because that is helping me to further my commitment to truth. So of course I don't pretend to be perfect. I have plenty of flaws. But this is one thing which I take quite seriously, is this commitment to truth and to commitment to being trustworthy. And the Buddha says, not spreading poisonous statements in the world. In Pali, this is avisang vadako lokasa. So I find this really beautiful. So the word visang in Pali, it's actually related to the word venom. So a more literal translation would be not spreading venomous statements in the world. And this becomes even more significant as we get into the next section. So the next section is on divisive speech, hisuna vacha. This is sometimes translated as malicious gossip, which is a bit of a looser translation, but covers the meaning. So again, I'll read the description the Buddha gives and then talk about it. It says, abandoning divisive speech, one refrains from divisive speech. What one has heard here, one does not say there for the purpose of dividing them. And what one has heard there, one does not say here for the purpose of dividing them. This is what not to do. So here he clearly defines that pisuna vacha means divisive speech. So you hear what some people say, and then you think, well, how can I use this information in order to divide people? How can I spread rumors? How can I spread gossip, which will antagonize people? against these other people? What can I do in order to build up hostility towards a person or a group of people? What speech can I spread around that will create negativity towards a person or a group of people? That's what he's talking about here. It's divisive speech, trying to divide people, trying to set people against each other, trying to create conflict and discord among people. This is what we're trying to avoid. Instead, the Buddha says, one unites those who are divided and assists those who are already together, approving of concord, enjoying concord, delighting in concord, speaking in ways that create concord. So this is what we should be doing. We should unite those who are divided. When we find out that there's been some conflict or disagreement between people, that there's some bad feelings between people, we should actively try to find out what we can do to help them overcome that conflict, to work through their issues, to come to an appreciation of each other, respect for each other, kindness towards each other. We should see what we can do to try to resolve the conflicts. So not just spreading around nasty rumors about people, but actually actively working to bring people together, to talk openly and clearly without rancor about the difficulties that have come up, to mediate positive discussions, to help people resolve their conflicts and get through the difficulties so that they can be united and together. And assisting those who are already together. So this is also an important thing. Even if there's no conflict between people, we should still do everything we can to prevent division from happening. Actively working to foster open conversations. Actively working to help people overcome problems before they even occur. Actively working to encourage openness, mutual trust, mutual kindness, mutual consideration among groups of people, so that conflict doesn't arise in the first place, so that division doesn't arise in the first place, so that there's no room for malicious gossip and divisive speech to get a foothold. So approving of concord, enjoying concord, delighting in concord, speaking in ways that create concord. Again, this emphasis he places on delighting in concord, delighting in people getting along. So not delighting in stirring up people against each other, not delighting in getting people to bitch about each other, but delighting in people cooperating with each other, delighting in people speaking kindly about each other. That's what we should delight in. And the next category, the Buddha says, abandoning harsh speech, one refrains from harsh speech. So pretty much a basic statement. Don't engage in harsh speech. And the Buddha says, the kind of speech which is gentle, pleasant to the ear, affectionate, heart-touching, humane, enjoyed by many, pleasing to many, this is the kind of speech that one speaks. So making an effort to speak gently, to speak in a way that is pleasant to hear. So this doesn't change the fact that we do sometimes need to communicate difficult information. We do sometimes need to deliver admonishment or constructive criticism once in a while. And the Buddha elsewhere gives some very clear instructions on how to give and receive admonishment correctly. And in the recent past, we've had talks on that subject, so you can refer to those talks for more information. So delivering admonishment is something that has to be done very carefully and properly, or else it just causes a lot of harm, a lot of hard feelings. And usually, if it's not done properly, it usually winds up making the problems worse. So admonishment must be done very carefully in order for it to be beneficial. And one of the elements of that is to deliver admonishment gently. So speaking words that are gentle and pleasing to the ear, affectionate, heart-touching, humane, enjoyable, and pleasing, that doesn't mean that you only say what people want to hear. It doesn't mean that you only deliver compliments. It doesn't mean that you only deliver meaningless, inane statements that people like. It does mean that sometimes you will say things which are admonishments, which are criticisms of somebody, but you're doing so as gently as you can. You're doing so in an affectionate way. You're doing so in a humane way. You're doing so in a way which is beneficial and which leads towards awakening. Again, we do need to really question our motives. If we want to deliver admonishment or criticism about someone, we need to really question why, whether we're actually doing it for their benefit or if we're just doing it out of resentment or an urge to get something off our chest. And if we do go ahead and deliver the admonishment or constructive criticism, to do so in this way, to do so in a way that is gentle, to do so in a way that is pleasant to hear, to do so in a way that is affectionate. So done out of love for the person, not out of any kind of hostility. Do so in a way that touches the heart. So one of the ways to really touch the heart of someone is to be extremely open and honest and clear and speaking in a very straightforward, open way about our emotions, about our experiences, about our perspectives, about our struggles, about our difficulties. So this tends to touch people's hearts because then they relate to us as fellow humans who have the same difficulties and struggles that they have. And speaking in a way that's humane. So always thinking, what is the humane way to speak? What is the way to speak which cannot be criticized? The way to speak which is blameless? What is the way to speak which is considerate of the others involved? So this is gentle speech, humane speech. That's what we're trying to do instead of harsh speech. And sometimes it's really difficult. Sometimes we actually do need to say to someone, look, I'm sorry, but I'm in a really difficult state right now, and I'm not going to be able to speak with you right now because it's going to come out wrong. My state of mind is likely to poison what I'm trying to say. So I need a bit of time before I can talk about this. It's okay to say that. It's okay to say, like, look, I really want to address this topic, but right now I can't. Right now, if I try, it's going to come out sideways. So I need time to sort out my own heart before I can talk openly about this. It's okay to say that. It's much better to say that than to spew vile poison because our heart is unrestrained and uncontrolled. So the next category, the Buddha says, abandoning useless speech. One refrains from useless speech. That's sampapalapa. So useless speech. And instead, the Buddha says, one speaks at the right time, one speaks factually, one speaks beneficially, one speaks about the Dhamma, one speaks about the Vinaya, one speaks statements that are worth treasuring, timely, reasonable, concise, and beneficial. Very lovely, eh? Mm-hmm. I especially love the phrase worth treasuring. So we don't just spew a bunch of junk. We say things that are worth treasuring. We say things that are valuable. We say the kind of things that somebody wants to remember. We say the sort of things that people want to write down in their list of memorable quotes. Such as when Ayasoma said, it's easier to follow the Theravada Vinaya than to learn Chinese. That's one of the quotes that I've never forgotten because it was so beautiful and worth treasuring. And she's right, by the way. I'm still trying to learn Chinese. I figured, well, I got the Theravada Vinaya part down. Learning Chinese, that's my next big struggle. Anyway, jokes aside, so one speaks at the right time. This is extremely important. You may have something true to say, you may have something beneficial to say, and you say it at the wrong time, disaster ensues. So always considering what is the best time, the proper time to bring this up. So a running truism that I've heard a lot in monasteries is never criticize someone right before lunch. It's not the right time, trust me. It is never the right time. 11:55, keep it to yourself. Wait until after lunch. Also, examples of wrong time is usually people don't like to be criticized in public. So criticizing somebody on their Facebook wall, usually a bad idea. Criticizing people in front of a group of their friends, usually a bad idea. So one speaks at the right time also means, generally speaking, it means if you're going to criticize someone, criticize them in private. Give them a chance to receive what you're saying without worrying about their public image, without worrying about what other people might think. Give them time to handle it in a one-on-one situation. That's almost always best. So one speaks at the right time. That also means not not bringing something up when somebody is in a bad emotional state or when they're having a really hard time. That's also usually not the right time. So one speaks factually. So we already covered that before. One speaks beneficially. So in other words, if you're going to speak, if you're going to say something, it should be something which is beneficial to the people involved. So a great measure is before talking, asking yourself, will this benefit the person I'm talking to? If the answer is no, then don't say it. Basic principle that we can use that also winds up with us talking a lot less, by the way. Ask ourselves, will this benefit the person I'm talking to? If the answer is no, don't say it. Then the Buddha recommends talking about the Dhamma. Always a good idea. There's a lovely sutta where the Buddha says, monks, when you are gathered together, you should either talk about the Dhamma or remain silent. Those are our options. Talk about Dhamma, don't talk. Good choices, eh? Nothing else, no other options. He says, or one speaks about the Vinaya. So the Vinaya, in this case, if you're not a monastic, you can also use that to mean talking about sila, talking about morality and virtue, talking about how to live and behave in an ethical and wholesome and moral way. Those are also great things to talk about. And so again, the Buddha says, one speaks statements that are worth treasuring. I love this, I love this. Always ask yourself, before you say anything, ask yourself, is this statement worth treasuring? So statements that are worth treasuring, timely, reasonable. That's another good one. Is it reasonable? Concise. So the word translated here is concise. In Pali, it's paryantavating. And there's actually a few ways of translating that. So paryantavating actually literally means it has boundaries. Paryanta means boundary or limit. So that can also mean placing boundaries on our speech, not violating boundaries with what we say. So both Bhikkhu Bodhi and Bhante Sujato both translated this as meaning moderate or succinct or concise. But that's only pulling out one side of this word, paryantavating. Paryantavating also means with boundaries. So respecting your own boundaries and respecting the other person's boundaries as well. So that may have been what the Buddha meant here rather than concise. But I also see why one would translate this as concise. It means that you place limits on your own speech. You don't just babble on and on endlessly. You just say what needs to be said. And the Buddha emphasizes, again, things that are beneficial, things that are connected with the goal. So the word is atta sanghita, which literally means connected with atta, And atta can mean benefit, but it can also mean the goal, as in enlightenment, the goal of the spiritual life. So atta samhita can also mean that which is connected with enlightenment, that which leads to enlightenment. So these are my thoughts on right speech. So at this time, I think we can switch to questions. I've spoken a bit longer than we normally do. So I hope there's enough time for questions. So please.
Thank you so much, Bante. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And there's a few questions already. Well, Gabriela shares Samavacha is so hard. Too many times it's just words. And Diana says, not sure if this sounds bad, but it's so relieving to know that right speech is also difficult for others.
Yeah,
yeah, we're not unique in our defilements. So let me see. Okay, there you go. Question. Regarding right speech, if we don't understand the meaning of a mantra, does it count as unproductive speech? Sampapalapa.
Well, first off, I recommend that you learn the meaning of the mantra. But second, I'm not a mantra teacher, so I'm not the best person to ask about mantras. I would actually recommend asking your mantra teacher. Ask them, what's the meaning of this mantra? What's the benefit of this mantra? What's the value of reciting this mantra? Ask them and see what they say. So I mostly relate to mantra practice as being a form of samadhi practice for controlling excessive thinking. I don't relate to mantra practice as it's taught in the Mantrayana schools of Mahayana and Tibetan Buddhism, because I don't have much experience with those styles of practice. The only form of mantra practice that I've ever had much connection with is the Pure Land practice of reciting Amitabha's name. But in that case, I also know exactly what the mantra is and exactly what it's for. So I don't think I would ever recite a mantra without knowing what it means. Yeah, I'm not a fan. But again, ask your mantra teachers, see what they say.
And second question, also from Gabriela, can profane speech not be harsh speech if it isn't aimed at a person or thing? And cannot profane speech be harsh speech if it is meant to hurt someone? For example, yeah, she's a total genius, quote finger, ha ha ha, sarcasm.
Yeah, I would agree with both statements. So a great example of this is Ajahn Brahm. Ajahn Brahm uses lots of profanities in his Dhamma talks, but there's no harshness there. He's not trying to hurt anybody or upset anybody or offend anybody. In fact, his use of profanity in his Dhamma talks, a lot of people find it very endearing and very engaging and very personable. They find that it really helps them connect with the message that he's presenting. So I see that as actually quite skillful and appropriate. So yeah, I would agree. Just because a word is considered profanity doesn't necessarily mean that we need to avoid using it. It does mean that we need to be more careful in how we use it, because we do need to be aware that it will sometimes upset people or offend people, and it will sometimes detract from our message. So we do need to be careful with the use of profanity, but we don't necessarily need to remove it entirely from our speech.
And Gita says, would developing right mindfulness lead to right speech?
Not necessarily. Unless you practice right mindfulness completely, which means following all the instructions in the Mahasatipatthana Sutta, in which case you're a fully enlightened being. Because if you look at the Satipatthana Sutta, it's basically giving a complete description of everything, more or less. The Mahasatipatthana Sutta anyway, because it also includes right speech, actually. The Mahasatipatthana Sutta includes a full description of the Noble Eightfold Path. The shorter Satipatthana Sutta doesn't, but the Mahasatipatthana Sutta does. But yeah, right mindfulness. So if you're closely watching your mind states and your attitudes and your emotions, then you will also notice your impulses towards harmful speech. You will notice your impulses towards false speech. You'll notice your impulses towards divisive speech and so on, which will make it much easier for you to restrain those harmful impulses. So yeah, I would say that right mindfulness helps tremendously with practicing right speech.
Nina also says, I at times used harsh speech against the president. And I'm trying to remedy my harsh speech, but it is difficult. That is the only precept that I really need to work on. Not foul speech, but harsh speech against the president.
Yeah, it's really difficult sometimes, especially if somebody repeatedly does unwholesome things. But even in those cases, we do need to be careful. And careful to, again, to make sure that what we are criticizing and condemning is the unwholesome action itself and not the person doing it. Remember, there are no such thing as persons in Buddhist thought. There's just actions, but there are no persons. There's no such thing as Donald Trump. It doesn't exist. There is such thing as unwholesome actions. And we are definitely obligated to recognize unwholesome actions as being unwholesome and to speak out against unwholesome actions when the time is right. So that's what I recommend. So I understand being upset or angry when a person in power does unwholesome things, especially when it harms a lot of people. I understand that. But we need to be careful to recognize that what is upsetting us is the unwholesomeness. What is upsetting us is the harmfulness. And that therefore, what we need to be speaking out against is the unwholesomeness, not attacking a person. Okay?
And AP says, just to reiterate, if a person refrains from telling the truth by not answering, is that in opposition to the right speech precept?
That gets into some gray territory where it's technically not a violation of right speech. In fact, elsewhere in the suttas, the Buddha makes it quite clear that you shouldn't speak just because something is true. It's actually a sutta that I'm planning to go over in the sutta study at some point. There's a sutta where somebody actually comes to the Buddha and says, well, I believe that if something is true, you should say it. And the Buddha says, no. The Buddha says, just because something is true doesn't mean you should say it. There is a time for saying it and a time for not saying it. So again, I'll go over that sutta one of these days. The Buddha goes into a lot more description on the subject. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with remaining silent. In fact, often silence is the best option. And actually, there are times when to say the truth is going to cause serious harm, in which case it's better not to say anything at all. We shouldn't tell lies, of course, but we also should not say truthful things that are harmful. So you talk about something else, or you remain silent. Okay?
And Marielle is asking, but what if we are unconsciously lying to ourselves? Then we're not doing right speech, but we think at the moment we are. And believe me, we lie to ourselves more than we think we do.
Yeah, which this is one of the really difficult parts of Buddhist practice, is coming to recognize our own self-delusion. Coming to recognize how much we delude and fool ourselves. And often we really need other people to help us with this. It can be really difficult to see our own self-inflicted delusions. But through mirroring each other, spiritual companions can help each other make much swifter progress. Okay.
Right. And Jens says, Bante, can you speak on right speech towards ourselves? It seems individuals, myself included, have harsh on true speech towards ourselves.
Yeah, of course, you should also apply all of these same principles to yourself. Speak gently to yourself. Speak kindly to yourself. Speak beneficially to yourself. Yeah, definitely.
Apparently, it's a widespread syndrome because Gabriela says, "Oh no, if that's true, then I do a lot of wrong speech with myself. You're such a fool, git, mad woman, Gabi."
So keep in mind, the Buddha also says that we should practice silanusati. So constantly telling ourselves about all our goodness. This is really valuable. So reminding ourselves, I'm a good person. I'm generous, I'm kind, I'm thoughtful, I follow the precepts, I don't intentionally hurt people, I'm doing what I can to develop wisdom and compassion, telling ourselves these things, and we're like, oh, wow, I'm actually a pretty good person. That's awesome.
Great. Gabriela says, I will try to recall my goodness when I'm feeling low about myself. Okay, great. And that was the last question. So unless something else pops up last minute that people want to share. Maybe not. Okay. All right. So tomorrow morning. Oh, poetic meter comment. I think I might have skipped one.
Poetic meter comment?
Yes, perhaps it's up there. Let's see. Gabriela up said, I do learn the meaning since I know Sanskrit, but there's a few sounds added for poetic meter. They aren't necessarily meaningful. Same with some other poetic practices to pad them to the right syllable. I think it was related to something that you were saying earlier.
I don't remember the context for that statement. So without knowing the context, I can't comment. I mean, that gets into talking about the structure of the Pali language, which I'm normally happy to discuss, but it's not really the subject of tonight.
Maybe we can have a special thing with ask Pali questions with Bhante, to Bhante, which will be only Gabriela showing up. But maybe not.
There are a couple of people on our Discord that have been asking recently for some kind of a Pali thing. So
oh, okay, that's great. Maybe we can see how it is. Oh, Gabriela is asking, are they still Sampapalapa? Since it's not in self meaningful, it's padding.
I don't think of it that way. Yeah, the added syllables in Pali poetry to make it fit the meter, I don't see that as Sampapalapa. I just see it as poetry. Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with that. Yeah.
And Marielle is asking, perhaps you can sometime have a basics of Pali course. I would attend it.
We'll see. Historically, I've occasionally offered Pali classes, and success rate has been relatively low with that. So I'm not so sure. No.
Maybe doing a pronunciation thing first. I think that would probably be more helpful to more people.
Oh yes, I do like teaching people Pali pronunciation. Anyway, I like giving Pali classes, but I usually get told afterwards that they're not very helpful. So I think I might just need to admit that I'm not the world's greatest Pali teacher. So I want people to learn Pali, but I'm not sure I'm the best person to teach it.
I attended your Pali pronunciation class at Bhavana.
That's pronunciation.
Yeah, pronunciation is good.
Anyway, I think we should go ahead and wrap up for the evening if there's no other questions.
All right. Jen, who's asking what's your Discord? Buddhist Insights does not have a Discord channel, but actually Bhante J does. So you can send an email and we'll put you in touch with whoever's organizing it.
Or we can convince Buddhist Insights to create one too.
Oh, mamma mia.
I think we're doing enough already.
Yeah, I think the sharing I mean, let's not add more resources, but share resources.
Yes.
Sharing is
No,
caring.
there's a bunch of us on they can give her the link.
Okay, great. Well, actually, Adriana is volunteering. So
There you
if
go.
Jen, you send us an email, we can put you in touch with Adriana, and you guys can talk together. All right. Okay, well, thank you so much for practicing together tonight, this evening. Tomorrow morning, there will be chanting and meditation. And in the evening, we will be speaking about right action. And that will be with maybe Bhante Jayasara, maybe Bhante Sudaso, maybe Ayasoma. We do not know.
I nominate Ayasoma.
I second.
I don't.
What about Stan?
Ooh,
Stan
maybe
can
a John Stan. You will only find out tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. on BNN. All right. Well, have a great. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.